in his strong victory point position and still fairly powerful political position, sorry about the lighting, President King is not really able to make any easy alliances. I was sort of investigating the idea of, hey, what if we make a pre-draw alliance, sort the issues. But if you hand out the jobs before the issues come up, you might end up with the wrong people where you need them. You might need a very effective person in a job, and you really don't want to assign these before at least you start seeing some of them. Nullification crisis, and this has a popularity 0-3. I don't have a vice president to boot this to. It's going to require the president and Congress. End of slavery is not resolved, so we can do this. The resolution drops revenue. Public support goes in favor of the conservatives. If it's failed or ignored, tension goes up, but I get influence for the conservatives. Either way, I'm getting something, but I really do not want a -3 popularity, right? Too bad I don't have a vice president. This is going to be hard. I'm probably going to have to give out some kind of bribes, at least offices, to prevent that 3 popularity loss. At the very least, I'm not in the absolute lead on the victory chart, but, when you count King's popularity and such not, it's hard. It's hard to say that I'm still not the most advantaged of all the factions. It came at a high price to the Madison faction. First of all, Madison's made Secretary of the Treasury. Winfield Scott parked in the general position. State and war both go over here. No other promises, just all those positions handed over, which means there's only one position left for King to take, which is special envoy. And he may need to trade that off as well, depending on what he gets. This does promote the vote, though. I just needed the one faction to support me. Everyone else, nobody really wanted to pay the points out of their own hands. Basically, nobody had any cards they wanted to play, and certainly nobody wants to play influence to push this through. So we get these, revenue goes down by 4. And we get some support for the conservatives. And this has been resolved successfully, which, prevents me of a 3-point loss, which is kind of good, but it's not strengthening my case. And now we come up with the state of Indiana. And this is the thing. If I want Indiana added, which gives me a popularity, what do I give to the Madison bunch? Well, we're going to see if anybody's got any Indiana statesmen. If not, chances are this isn't going to pass very easily, because I just do not have things. I can't keep feeding him with stuff. The 3 points of popularity was a big swing, but I kind of need this 1 point too. I need to come out of the presidency gaining stuff, right? And no Missouri Compromise here. The next card up, extension of the slavery crisis. President plus Congress requires end slavery not resolved. That's correct. This is a nice card, 3-point popularity. I might be able, to trade a little bit more to him for this, but 6 difficulty. I don't have the influence. Rufus King sucks. I can't do it. It's going to be failed or ignored, which increases tension by 1. And then 2 influence to the Conservative Party leader. And this will show up in the next deck as more states will apply for admittance. And now we're on the last card. Let's see what we get here. Defunding of the Bank of USA. Again, a big difficulty. Oh, I was close. If I had a card. I did not have a card that could give me anything, and I don't think anybody was trading anything. Okay, but this one I could get away with. This would have required creating a national bank, and we failed at that. I believe this just does not happen. It's not an available event, as it were. I'll look up to see if a replacement is drawn, but I don't think so. because that would screw with the number of turns in the game. The solution is this doesn't just go away, it goes back onto the deck. Now it still won't be able to be used because the bank was never created. And now we draw another final one. It's the Northwest Indian War. It's going to require a general. I've already assigned Winfield Scott the generalship. Now I could transfer that generalship if I want to someone who's in the Conservative Party. Personally, I have Pinckney I could use. This is difficulty 4. If resolved, it gives some popularity. If failed or ignored, it goes to the next deck. I may sack Scott just because 3 influence to get 2 popularity sounds good. And no matter what, my president's going to get some popularity for it. But yeah, I'm going to sack Winfield Scott and give this over to Thomas Pinckney. He immediately gets one of these. We have a success in the Northwest Indian War. Met Anthony Wayne. And that means 2 popularity for our president and 2 popularity for Pinckney. Overall, a very good card for us. And now it goes into there. You know, Scott pulled himself 1 point of popularity off the generalship, but I'm not going to let him have more. He could be a very dangerous character. He has a lot of capability. This is kind of a strange thing here. So, in general, you could say, look, the necessary administrative skills, etc., that president would have kind of equate to military skills. The military administrative skills that a great general, especially the commander of the army, would have. The problem with that is, if you look at Grant, we're not talking about the political skills here. Those are represented by the points here. But Grant is clearly an outstanding general and a horrible administrator. He trusted the wrong people with the wrong stuff. He had a lot of political support. He had a lot of support in Congress. He did not have the capable managing hand to either run a corrupt administration well, or more likely to run an administration well without it going corrupt, unbeknownst to him, given how poor he ended up after his presidency. The latter seems far and away the more likely. Now I'm out of issues. Quite simply, I would like to appoint a special envoy. Who do I want? Do I want Martin Van Buren, or do I want to give it to Pickering? I want it to go to one of my people. No question there. I don't really see a need to keep piling up popularity on more conservatives. I've got a lot of popularity on Pinckney, which might make him electable. So we'll give it to Van Buren. Give me a little bit of hedging the bet on that side. And now that's going to move us into what? Well, we'll come back after the election, or during the election, probably. As we enter into the election cycle, we've got Madison versus Rufus King. Now, Madison has to pick his running mate first because of the public support. And he's got a tricky situation. He's got a lot of people that he would love to push one of them forward, but he's got a real problem here. He's from Virginia. Every one of these is Southern or Western. There are some really enticing people like James Buchanan, the Pennsylvania fellow. The danger with that, though, is you pick Buchanan, and there's no particular desire, you know, being picked and allowed to be vice president. Hey, you know, I may or may not get it because of the 12th Amendment situation. I may or may not, you know, be able to come in second. It's unlikely. Chances are it's going to be a split ticket in this game. So, you know, why would I make a deal with you? I can't really help you except by blocking the enemy. So the question then becomes, am I all that terribly worried about purple who has a good deal of victory points. I'll give you that. Or is it that I would rather, you know, and do I want to make sure he doesn't get it? Or am I, you know, more interested in feathering my own nest and getting one of my people up there? Strangely, popularity doesn't matter for this. I find that there are certain aspects of the electoral system. I find it a very clever little game on that. You know, this maneuvering to block and everything. I'm not sure how, you know, what that... Some of that is representative. It may be a little too severe in some cases because I think states like New York, and that may be the New York splits the vote card and stuff like that, had a tendency to kind of vote a little outside of their regional politics. But going beyond that, it's sort of more of a gameplay thing. You know, if I pick Buchanan, he has no real reason to particularly be useful to me. I'm almost as big a threat, the yellow player, although I have no victory points cashed, but I have such a powerful faction. It's almost as big a scary threat as Rufus King and this conservative party would be. So the real question is, how does yellow feel about letting purple run away with it? Is he willing to put a Buchanan in or an Aaron Burr, who may be able to run away with the victory as a whole? And I think the answer is yes, I'm willing to put one of those two in because I would rather defeat him for president than worry about anything else. So that's what we're going to see. I don't know who King's going to nominate. I got to do some calculations because now I have the important information. Actually, I'm not sure, but I think it's going to be Buchanan, not Burr. Indeed, I settled on Buchanan, in part because I have that split the vote in New York, in part because the western states, I don't know if you can see, have become larger. Of course, everything's become larger. The western and southern states, Georgia, for example, has become wealthy too. But you can see these big northeasterns have also gotten bigger. New Jersey, not much, but you know, I think the weight is moving more southern and western, though, which is why King picks Thomas Pinckney from South Carolina as his running mate. And now King is going to place his two, well, New York, South Carolina. Now there's a danger that King may lose the election to his running mate and come in vice president, just like Hamilton did. But that's what we have to deal with. And we have a Virginia and a Pennsylvania setup. And, you know, it's kind of predetermined at this point. I don't know what the numbers are going to come out. I didn't pre-run the election as the conservative side. But let's see. So now I'm in a race south because there's nothing I can really do to protect up here. And on a race north here, I've now put a block on Virginia. Madison and Pinckney own the South because of that block. What's kind of neat is once Ohio comes in, it ends up linking into Kentucky, and you know this electoral map stops being the same effect that it has. Well, if this is cleared, and this is my presidential candidate choice, I'm definitely going into Maryland because there's nobody coming through here. And then my purple, well, it becomes more important for me to go north or not. I think it actually becomes more important for me to go into Maryland and block the red player from heading any further south. And I believe Rufus King's got trouble. He's safe in this direction. Orange isn't going anywhere. Too exciting, so we'll go into Kentucky. Blue has to sleaze its way into Delaware. I would prefer, I suppose, to have Madison with his big 4 ability as president. Well, certainly I would prefer it than someone else as Buchanan. And let's see, I've got some danger there. Buchanan's failed to block off this. He's actually interested in New Jersey. He wants to prevent, he's preventing two things. Well, no, he wants to prevent Madison from getting the presidency. What a dick. Well, it's how the game operates. And there goes King, Pinckney. Madison's got to go somewhere. It doesn't really matter too much where. And then Buchanan has to go up here. Not much effect on that. We'll go into there. And we're just filling them out here. I'll come back after the votes are calculated. Oh, the initial tally comes out with King with 109 and Buchanan at 116. The Northeast is still too powerful for the Southerners to really push their way in, as long as a couple of Northeastern candidates block the Southerners from getting up. Now, would it have been possible for Buchanan to allow Madison up? Well, yeah, but why? He ended up winning, you know? We have some options here. There's two cards I usually don't bother mentioning. There's two cards in play here. One is the nullifier party, which King would have available. He could drop half the votes out of Carolinas, but that's for the two losing Southern candidates, Madison and Pinckney, who don't have enough votes. It might be an option if something were to change. The other side is New York divides its vote. That would allow Madison to put one of his counters, the little blue one, under one of these others. The problem with that is, and then he'd get half that person's vote, that cube's vote. So New York's worth 25, 13 would go to the original, 12 to the new person. Well, Madison could play it on Buchanan, and losing 12 votes would drop Buchanan to 104. Adding 13 votes to Madison would put him up to 104. I thought it was 106. I don't know why I was miscounting, but no, he'd only get 12. It would put him up to 103. So he wouldn't even win against Buchanan in that case, and King would still be president. That's absolutely not what I want. If I did it to King, I would drop King below Madison, and Madison would end up winning the vice presidency. Is that card worth it for the vice presidency? I don't think so, because there's a lot of issues in this deck. It doesn't go away until the end of this deck. So I think I can win a presidency with that card potentially. Oh, I'm sorry, that's not... Here's why it wasn't enough points. Okay, so it's 15 and 16. It's New York, not Pennsylvania. So 16 off of Buchanan, 15 added to Madison would bring him to 106, which would make him King's vice president. Likewise, he could trash King and take vice president to Buchanan, which would be the more desirable outcome. It would get me a popularity. But I don't really want to be vice president. Vice president is the most god-awful job in this game, unless you're both of the same coterie, because the president can throw the worst damn issues at you, the ones that he doesn't want to resolve. It is just a hellish position, which is why you never want to be vice president. What I'm seeing here is folks who have the party lead, they really want to get the 12th Amendment passed, because they're the folks who are walking in with the assured nomination, right? But they're not assured the presidency with that nomination. As we see yet again, was Buchanan a bad choice? Should I have picked someone else? Should I have picked Burr, who maybe wouldn't have been able to push as far south? Yeah, probably. I was looking at, hey, if we close down Maryland, that's great. Well, what if we had managed to close down Pennsylvania? Well, we wouldn't have, because King would have been able to push down there. It would have been the same kind of result. The big northerner was going to beat me out. The hope was that the New York card would fix my situation and I'd get to be president. So we have a new president, and Rufus King is demoted to vice president. We keep doing that. The president keeps getting put in that, yeah, you're experienced, you'll help him do his job role. Okay, so Rufus King is sort of this weird vice president who actually can't be screwed, which is kind of neat, because he's too important, having been president already, so you can't assign jobs to a task to him. Well, leadership of the party now goes to Pinckney as the next likely presidential candidate. Buchanan gets his election. We'll talk about that in a moment. Madison still stays as head of the party. He is still the most popular of the members. Buchanan's an interesting case. Remember when I was talking out my ass about Winfield Scott? Well, here's a guy who is too young. I don't know what era we're in, right? What time period we're in. I'm trying to think how many elections have we had. I should be able to see there. So we had 5 elections since what, the mid 1790s. That's 20 years. So, you know, it's right around 1820 or so right now. Madison was born in 1791. He's too young. That just wouldn't be allowed. But again, you know, there's a certain level of, hey, you don't want too much stacking the deck in terms of when the different people come out and everything. It creates a more interesting game, and allowing a little bit of ahistorical results in terms of the actual persons. It's nice. So Buchanan was essentially something of a nobody in a lot of ways. Yes, he got elected president. That's pretty important. But, you know, someone else could have been elected in this place. So instead of having faceless things, it's nice to have the history written into here, etc. So I don't have any objection to that. The Gallatin thing is kind of interesting, though. I brought that up, and Rick brought up to me, well, you know, it was kind of unknown whether or not he could have served, because you were allowed, you didn't have to be a citizen from birth. That would be impossible. George Washington wasn't a citizen of the United States from birth. There was an exemption in there. The problem was that he was born outside of the continental U.S. At the time. He was born in Switzerland. So, you know, there would definitely be an issue raised. And the question is, what kind of issue would that be? To a large extent, it might be popular. He might have trouble accumulating the vote, but the vote wasn't that much of a popular vote. It was really a party machine vote for the entire era of this game. So it is possible that, it is very possible that an unpopular person like Buchanan, an unknown, gets selected through the political machinations. To some extent, I feel like popularity had some importance. For example, George Washington was elected because of his popularity, in the sense that had anyone else been elected, somehow, through some kind of dealing, it would have just been such a tainted scandal. But if you look at even much, much later on, the Tilden Hayes election and everything, it was just, you know, so much a sausage factory in terms of how politics was handled in that era. I'm not sure it's much better now, but it's certainly more a propaganda battle than a deal-cutting one. So, beyond that, and that's why, you know, someone like Henry Clay had a chance. He wasn't a terribly popular person, but he had a chance because he was such an insider and could have cut all the deals. The problem was he just couldn't get the right deal cut that got him to the presidency. Okay, I don't think he ever got nominated, actually, and that was to some extent the problem. Okay, where were we? We were somewhere. Oh, to the Gallatin issue. So, my feeling is the Gallatin card should have a special rule on it. This is just kind of a, wow, you know, post-design, look at the game and say, hey, wouldn't it be cool if this? That he would be brought before the Chief Justice to make the decision. Can you run or not? You know, if you get nominated, the Chief Justice has the right to declare, yes, you can, no, you can't. Or maybe after the election, but I think that's too late. I think the suit should have to happen when he's actually running. Discarding all the votes after the fact, that should be almost impossible. So I don't know if I'd allow that at all. But that would be kind of a cool little option there. All right. Still have John Jay as our Chief Justice. So now we're on to the people phase and such not. Somewhat in conjunction with Buchanan's age at this point, I feel like the action decks may be a little too small. I've just pulled into the third action deck for this drafting hand, and yeah, we got people from the second deck that were drawn earlier in the deck, and you know, some of the earlier cards that have come back in are filling things out. It may have to do with the fact that I haven't been playing the actual action cards that give you a bonus maybe as often as some of the playtester groups did. But my feeling here is that there's just too few cards in some of those early decks. And that kind of accelerating the ages, or accelerating the amount of times we go through this deck. Why would that happen? Well, also it's a 6-player game, so there's room for more of these cards to be out. There could be 18 of them out among the players. If playtesting was done with smaller groups, the time pattern might go more slowly. So it might actually make sense to, like I do in terms of the starting decks in Republic of Rome, for this game to avoid some of the problems is to limit the hand size. The more players you have, that gives you less capability to control what you can do, though. So it's a little risky in terms of gameplay. But what we're seeing, like Buchanan coming out before a little early, well, now we're in the third deck. We're talking about, you know, your Lincoln in here and your Douglas and Breckinridge. These are people who shouldn't be active in the 1820s. By any means. And in a sense, Buchanan is a little early. I think, you know, he's a young man for his deck anyway. And so, you know, compared to somebody like, say, Clay here, who is a fairly old and established person by the beginning of the game. Well, okay, maybe not that old, in his 20s, but I mean, he seems the right age for that early second deck. But right now, I feel like I should still be in the midst of the second deck, and I'm drawing from the third deck, and we could be seeing some very, very early occurrences of people. And some of that has to do, I think, with the number of players and the number of cards that they have in their hand. I'm not sure how much, though, because you always draw 7 of these. And if I'm right and they get buried under the action deck afterwards, that should maintain the same pace. If that's the case, there just aren't enough cards. And hey, maybe, you know, I haven't looked at the original version, the print and play version. Maybe a decision was made. The game's fine without so many cards as a game, but it kind of goes a little off the rails of the original design and ends up with people coming too quickly. There's a certain degree to which you can kind of game the victory point chart, I think, by not doing terribly well. Like a lot of games with catch-up mechanisms. In this particular case, purple's way ahead, not just on here, but when you add the cubes in, they got a bunch here that were way up above everyone else. Great. You know, that may be a commanding lead that wins them the game in the long run. But yellow, with its hugely powerful political position, and a decent amount of white cubes on the board, but because no one's died, well, they have no points in the bank, and they haven't been getting presidencies, etc. So they're actually in a fairly strong position to keep adding to their coalition of power. They might be able to run ahead and make a lot of points at once. In a sense, that's what the Hamilton coalition did. It wasn't doing all that well, and then it started scoring big all at once. Well, that may just be the pattern of the game, and you get kind of used to how to manipulate that, and you don't worry too much about it. But it's not just a matter of other players' perceptions. Everybody's got the perception that yellow's doing quite well, actually, even though their points aren't very good. But the catch-up mechanism means that they go fairly early in the draw, and as long as that's the case, they're going to keep being able to add politicians to their group, if that's what they wish. If they have something that they think is more important, which may be the case, there's some interesting cards in here, they'll take them. But it's just, you know, not necessarily a bad thing about the game. It's a point about the game to look at and to think about. as you're playing, as you're considering it, more from the game point of view than any historical subject matter. Getting into an interesting period where I'm actually up here trying to decide what Madison's group's going to do, but where the groundwork that was done on the political side for the conservatives especially, and started upping the value. It was around 7. Burr turned around, boosted some newspapers, and also paid to whip up support and reduced it a point. But then over here, looking at this, he has a lot of conservatives, but most interestingly, he has a couple of fairly popular people. Granted, they don't have a lot of popularity on them, but they rank among the top folk. John Jay, DeWitt Clinton, Pinckney's got the lead there, no question. Daniel Webster. Pinckney obviously is way up there. But he's got a couple of people in the range that he could be running for president, and some of them are in fairly valuable locations, like Virginia. Virginia is appealing. Marshall's also fairly old, so he could conceivably run if it goes to a one-party system, where he's not going to necessarily get a chance of running if it's in the normal two-party style system. Actually, I also have Jerry, who's got 3. He's allowed to run if we go to a one-party system, so that's kind of an interesting side. He would be the, the protest candidate, right? The less conservative of the bunch. Well, that makes things very interesting, and he is very old, so he's almost certainly going to be available. Of course, he's from Massachusetts. We've seen that the Northeast has held its own recently, but if new states start getting added to the West, that's going to weaken that situation. So, I hope I added Ohio. They better be in the deck. Yeah, you've got to put the states back into the next deck because they have another chance to come in. So anyway, this puts an interesting question here. He doesn't have a bad choice. He has someone, but he's all that way down in South Carolina who might be running for the presidency. That seems unlikely. Whereas the two-party system definitely favors someone like Madison. So I think we're also going to be paying to try to improve the more liberal side of things. And this should be gone. I got the support from it, and now it disappears. And as we finish up the turn, the Marshall camp bought the next bid for 2. They had a decent amount of reserves back. They pulled someone they needed to hold on to. Fremont, from all the way in California. Can't do much with him. So I played Zach Taylor. We got Kentucky in the game, so I can do that. And also put some of this in, boosted the points because I'm particularly interested in the possibility of Elbridge Gerry becoming president. I think he's my best shot at it, and I could probably do some pretty cool stuff in that condition. And I may actually have a second candidate in play with Marshall, which would be really a potent position to have two of the candidates, especially a Massachusetts-Virginia combination like that. They wouldn't be adding together, obviously, but they would be able to create problems for anyone else. In particular, good old Thomas Pinckney down here, who starts way down in South Carolina. Probably not the best place to be, although it's filled out a little bit better with these western states coming into play. Alright, well, we're going into the next turn, and there'll definitely be room on this video for 2 turns. I don't think I mentioned at any point earlier, but when we had a recent situation where a state ended up getting buried, and a new card gets drawn for that, and then it was Rick pointed out to me that that's the designer, that he's been very good about contacting me by email and telling me, hey, this is the design idea behind this. This is where you were fucking up. Hey, very nice about it. It's just very helpful to have that kind of input in real time. Usually I get it, someone's not as interested in what I have to say about their game. So, and I'm not one to reach out. Anyway, that I had missed Ohio and had just discarded them but not drawn another event for them. And I completely believe that. I didn't go back and check or anything, but it seems likely. But then I realized, I think there were 2 states that got buried, and probably the extra card was one of those 2 states I drew an extra card for. And what I think what happens in that case is actually you move to the next issue deck, and there should have been an extra card drawn. We're not going to go back and fix that like a lot of the other errors I make. I'm just learning the game here, and I'm making a lot of mistakes. But we're ready to start with the Buchanan presidency. I wish I was keeping track of how many I've had. This is the kind of game that I can really see. If I didn't have such a pile of things I wanted to video, this is definitely one that I could have seen I would play immediately again, and then probably come back to after a couple more games of something else, of different things. It may happen anyway. This is the kind of game that I like to explore. I may not do it on video, but this is reminding me of things like Republic of Rome, obviously, that it's based on, to some extent, fairly loosely. It's a similar system. Or one of my very favorites of all time, La Révolution Française. I felt like Republic of Rome I always kind of understood. The rules are a bitch. But with this one, I'm not quite sure that I get, how to engineer both effective policies as a player and also ones that end up historical and how much they align. I think this probably is a little easier than La Révolution Française, which I spent many, many games despairing, not exactly, but wondering if there was anything historical in it. Here I feel much closer to that. And then eventually, the last time I played La Révolution, I felt like I had the most historical game of all, having played it many, many times, finally playing it on video. And I was kind of astounded by the results that I got, closer to the historical. But it took a long time to get over, what sort of the naive view, maybe my opportunism, etc., creates in a game. I feel like this is another one where there's a lot of subtlety in your choices of running mates in terms of making your own chance of being president possible. Obviously, you might be able to make some deals with a player, but even when we saw one person playing both candidates with the Rufus and trying to remember who. Yeah, I don't know. We had a situation where we had Hamilton and Rufus, where they came in first and second, but they couldn't engineer it so that Rufus had less votes and still have won the scenario, because you're forced to, play out the rest of your cubes here, and they ended up just having a dominance over a region that gave them the win, but it gave them the exact same number of votes, creating an Aaron Burr type situation. Sometimes you can't avoid it without losing the election, and that's kind of frustrating, but there you have it. Okay, so let's start. This is the Buchanan administration. He's not cutting any deals, and he draws Michigan, and I believe he really wants Michigan, if I recall correctly. Nope, he really wants Missouri. However, there's a popularity at stake that makes it a positive gain. It's not going to make much difference in anything. It doesn't connect to anything, which means it has this sort of interesting possibility, which is that once somebody's closed out of a political space, if Ohio doesn't come into play, I think Ohio's probably the only place, maybe Indiana could help us here, but if you're closed out of the ability to move on here, you can then kind of do a jump over to an area that's not at all connected to the East Coast and campaign there. You can't go back into the East Coast from the West, though, which is kind of or to the seaboard states. So we're going to see if he can get this passed with some sort of alliance. He probably can, but we'll see. And the failures of past administrations are coming to light here. I can't do a Maine admission because we didn't get a Missouri Compromise or any other extension of the slavery crisis. So that's going to mean another card is drawn. We passed Michigan. They got added in. And it's kind of strange because, honestly, if you're looking at the Great Compromise type situation, no state should be allowed in. Now, I understand there's kind of this baking of, well, you know, that crisis wouldn't be a big deal if they weren't adding free states. But as it stands, well, they're also not adding slave states. I don't see Alabama or Texas in here. So this is going to go away, and that's going to, well, it's going to go into the third deck, and that's going to open up room for another issue for this turn. We'll draw this one and see what we get. Ohio. So this isn't going to be a problem. We had the Northwest Indian War resolved. I wonder how that ended up so recent. Did that just get ignored? Or failed, maybe? And we have signed certain people in to support us on the last bid, but they're not really promising too much on the current one. I've got to give Madison a tariff. That'll probably draw his support. But I'm not sure that the Secretary of War... wow, I gave him Secretary of War, not General? That's not what I intended. I had not intended to give him a position. I had intended to strip the generalship from Pinckney and give it to Taylor. Oops. Yeah. General is kind of a weird position because it can carry over between different terms, so it has some potential value, but it would also be possible to strip Taylor of this right now and put Winfield Scott back in charge if need be. So there's some weird situations with that. But at this point, I'm looking at the admission. Madison's probably griping about not getting his tariff in time, mainly because I forgot. And I can probably hold that over his head and get another vote out of him for Ohio. And that's kind of the important thing, because then, you know, I only have to probably pay one office for someone else's vote. Between Buchanan... you know what? Buchanan had to spend an influence that he didn't spend. Allocating Michigan into it, and he's going to have to do that again with Ohio. This is not a hard job adding states, but it's beyond Buchanan's base ability. He's not very effective here. You know what's kind of funny is Patrick Henry kicking around still. Not that he should be dead, although he's fairly old, but I'm kind of surprised that there's nothing that kind of makes someone disappear other than duels. He was really persona non grata fairly soon in the Republic. So yeah, I'll see if I can get another vote together and spend more influence for more popularity for Buchanan. That played out. We had to give George Clinton Secretary of War. Same old guys kind of kicking around. And that may be kind of a problem. Well, no. I was thinking about Eldridge Gerry, but no, the Conservatives aren't getting any bonuses here. Buchanan managed to get points, along with Madison, on passing really kind of the lousy tariff here. We're starting to get into bad tariffs, right? This one's going to cost 5 revenue, and it gave influence over to the Conservatives. And this one actually will lose 15 revenue once it's passed, and increase tensions. So the tariffs start not serving the country well in terms of the economics, even if they have political advantages to passing them, and nobody's terribly upset about them. And taxes, of course, nobody wants taxes. So now we also passed Ohio, and this is getting kind of funky in terms of shape, but you can kind of follow it out. Pennsylvania is next to Ohio, Ohio is next to Michigan, etc. And we're getting a larger little country, which is going to be less blocked. It's going to be easier. Well, it's going to electoral politics are going to become more complicated. It's not going to be, oh, I can put a little wedge in Maryland and it's over, right? So that's kind of interesting. And we'll draw another one, and we get Illinois. And you know what? I believe I again forgot to pay the influence for Buchanan. There's a level at which people are not terribly willing to keep supporting him here. There may be a demand for both of these positions from the people next to him. Now, there's a problem with that. Now, if I add Illinois, I'm losing 2 positions that would give me 2 additional points of popularity. So I think Illinois is going to fail, and it's going to go under the deck, and that'll bring another issue up. The problem with that, of course, is that other issue may be more than Buchanan can handle. That's the problem with punting on these states, I guess. Crap, I've been screwing up. No, it's not when a state fails that it gets... If it fails, it gets put in for the next deck. But it's when a prerequisite isn't there. God knows what I've been screwing up. But I'm going to bury this issue because I drew one that doesn't have a prerequisite. We're going to just say the order was different. We got a death, though. That was the end of George Clinton. And I'm just going to bury this one because I had... Maine failed its prerequisite, so I think we're actually good there. And Illinois just failed, so I drew 1 too many cards, which will be that last card that I didn't get to play. This one failed in its prerequisite, so yes, I should get another card because of that, because if an issue doesn't have a prerequisite. So now I'm going to be going forward. I've got a stronger hand, though. I've got these... and it evens out because what it means is that issue didn't have to be dealt with, so it gets booted into the next deck. I don't know. That's the same with the states, though, or other things that get booted into the deck. I've got a stronger hand now, though, because my Secretary of War is gone, so I have an extra position to hand out. In particular, if this issue doesn't require me to get Congress's approval for something or I don't desire it, I can give Henry... Patrick Henry's ancient. Then again, so was Clinton. Henry's even older, like in their 80s. But I can send 1 position into the hands of Polk, who's a conservative. So let's see. I get Missouri. So to me, unless I have Hart Benton, which I think I do. Okay, so I have a vested interest in getting Missouri on the board. So I'm going to try... Did we have the Louisiana Purchase completed? Yes, we did not have the extension of slavery, so Missouri is not coming into play, and that makes sense. Missouri and Maine are the Missouri Compromise cards, and we instead get Mississippi, which I'm a lot less interested in. I don't know about an Indian Removal Act. I don't seem to remember that coming up. No. So that one's not going to come. I don't know. That may be frozen, actually. Let me back another one here. Was that just a failure and now we have an Indian state in the South? So much we failed. These don't get bumped into another era. Nope. So Indian removal should be in the deck somewhere, I think. Let's keep going. Arkansas requires a Louisiana Purchase. At least we got that. But do I terribly want Arkansas added? Because whatever I spend for it, I'm going to have to spend an influence and one of these jobs probably. So I'm probably going to bury Arkansas because it's not of any great interest to me. It's not terribly important to the electoral politics either. If I was a decent president, I could take it in. But as it stands, I I'm just going to ignore it unless somebody makes a big offer to me. The net effect of that is a bunch of patronage going out to my little buddies. All right, well, on to Treasury and elections. As we see more and more of the elections coming out, it's becoming clear that winning an election for your party isn't terribly valuable. That picking the guy who's going to win it for your party may not be the best move you can make. And that actually is informing both the following decisions, I think. First of all, James Madison wins the Democratic nomination again. That means Buchanan's gone one way or another. Well, no. He could be selected as a running mate, and he could win the presidency that way. Well, that's the last thing I want to have happen. It seems very likely that he would. The only problem with not having that happen is that might hand the election over to the conservative side. They have some of the advantages because they have the higher public support. So that creates a problem, but I also want to be competitive and make sure that I win one of the presidencies here as the nominee of the party. So I'm actually picking James Monroe. There is no better choice from my point of view. Going down to Georgia or Kentucky, if you start looking at the electoral map, those aren't going to terribly help me. They're way down in the south. Now, they may be able to block out. Well, Kentucky's not so bad. If I could block out to Ohio through Virginia, that's kind of rich. My first thought, but I'll tell you what, Monroe in Virginia is just as valuable, and he has a greater popularity, and he already has some, so he'll be a better protege for Madison. And it doesn't really matter to me which one wins because neither one's elected. So Buchanan's, we could have the situation where we had the vice president who then manages to, or the president who manages to get elected as vice president and then disappears. You don't want to be in that situation. But here, I don't care which one ends up with the top office, as long as one of my people does. And I think Virginia has a more centralized and powerful position. So yes, I'm going with that choice. But over here, it gets harder. Pinckney is the nominee for the Conservatives automatically, most popularity. Does he want to keep the presidency in his own little coalition? Well, sure. Can he do it with Pickering? The problem with Pinckney is he's South Carolina. Pickering's so far over in Massachusetts. Is that going to be able to do it? Well, maybe. Why the maybe? Who am I going to get that's better than Massachusetts? I'm not going to be able to create that northern block, the northeast block that I've had that was very victorious. For example, Buchanan was, no, he wasn't able to because he was running with King against King. But we've seen a couple of cases over the Conservatives when we had Hamilton and King running together as running mates, where one party was able to just dominate the rich states of the Northeast. Those states are becoming less important, too, to boot. So I think going with a North-South alliance works well. I don't want to put John Jay up there because then I lose Chief Justice. Now, of course, I could appoint someone else Chief Justice if he were to win, one of the two offices. But it is the richer option. But what if I only win the vice presidency? Then I wouldn't be able to, what if John Jay wins the vice presidency? Then I lose Chief Justice, and that seems like a valuable position. It's not as powerful as you would like, though, because someone else is holding the judicial review card and just hasn't been playing it because Jay's still there holding that position. So I think I'm going to go with the Pinckney-Pickering combination. And, well, why don't we start playing things out? I think playing early is good. So Pinckney is South Carolina. Pickering is going to be Massachusetts. And then for the Democratic Republicans, I think they still are. I can never remember. And I don't know what the date is. So they're both going into Virginia. Boom. The middle of the country is blocked off by the Virginians. And basically, what I think is going to happen is one of them is going to go north, one of them is going to go south. Again, I don't much care which one goes where. Not a lot here to do about this. Somebody goes into Carolina, I can get Georgia anyway. I can't go this way, so into Tennessee I go. It's got to be that route. Coming out this way, I don't have any choices. It's into New York. And now, well, this is worth more, so we'll go up to Ohio, and then coming down this way. Are the Carolinas particularly important? Well, you know what? I can do better than that. We're blocking their southern candidate off in Kentucky. And I think we just probably won the election for one of our people with that little move. All right, into Georgia. Michigan's connected. That's the problem. If Michigan wasn't connected, not that it's worth a lot of votes, but if Michigan wasn't connected, we could jump up there after being sealed off. But since it is, it means Orange going into Pennsylvania. He's going to get a pretty good amount of votes, though. But whoever sleazes up with him is going to get some too. And speaking of sleazing up, into Ohio with both. And that just won us Michigan as well. I'm cut off with nothing but the Northeast. I probably might get a vice presidency this way. Okay, what's next? We'll go with the bigger votes into Pennsylvania and the smaller ones into Maryland. And not a lot of option here. Bigger votes into New York. Also, actually, I don't even have to go there. Is there something else I could block off of use? See, I can't make it to Delaware, so I can't close that out. I could go to New Jersey. That would reduce the amount of votes that Monroe, I have to look aside, which is why you see me kind of fade back a little bit whenever that's happening. That's what's going on, is playing. So, yeah, I'll go into New York here. Let him try to collect up points. Hey, he might do very well anyway. We slip into Delaware. And now the Democrats. Looks to me like the Carolinas are the more valuable of the two. I'm going to go with, you know, I don't care which one's going to go. And I think Madison's going to get a lot of votes. So I'm going to split it this way. You know, I could count these and make damn sure. So let's take a look at what he's got. He's got 13, 21, 46, 77, 79, 119. What are we looking at? 33, 45, 70, 101. I can probably make the extra points up by going into New England. So I'm fine with him. So you know what? I'm going to try to get as many votes with the purple pieces as I can. Which means purple's going to go into North Carolina and blue's going to go into New England because I can't get purple up there. And we're out for the conservatives, so we get to keep playing liberals. Blue goes first again. Blue will go up here, and purple will go down in Tennessee. And I think we've actually won an election as we intend. We're back to blue and purple. Blue has to play in New Jersey. That's 8 votes. And then purple can go down here in Georgia, and another purple up in Michigan. And I believe we won both positions. I'm pretty sure of that. But I believe Madison's going to come out ahead, but I'll make sure of that. Our elections are 154 for Madison, 106 for Monroe, 119 for Pickering. That's going to put Pickering with the vice presidential ticket office. I have the ability, I'm sorry, not Pickering, is it? Yeah, Pickering, our Massachusetts man. I have New York State divides its vote. If I was further in the deck, I would be playing this probably. This would allow me to put a cube underneath his and give that cube over to, looks like the purple player, who would be Monroe, who would get half the New York vote. Sorry, New York, not Pennsylvania. Half the New York votes, so he'd have 15 extra votes, putting him up to 121, and Pickering would lose those 15, being down to 104. That would get me both positions. But you know what? Vice president is a point of popularity. And an opponent as a vice president can be a helpful thing. Therefore, I have no terrible desire to make that change. I don't really want both my candidates to win. What I wanted to make sure was that I don't end up with my only person being the vice presidential candidate. Vice president's kind of a negative position. It's, who was it who resigned to become Speaker of the House? I'm trying to remember. Is it Clay? I don't think so. 5-time loser for president. Yeah, I don't think it was Clay. I don't remember who the Speaker of the House was. The guy who resigned the vice presidency to become Speaker of the House. I mean, vice president was such an unimportant position, except that it could lead to president. So we are going to allow Pickering to take the vice presidency. I think it's worth it because that card could be a full presidential election at some point. And I guess that's about it. There, I thought I'd been favoring Madison over Monroe to make sure I got the presidential election. That would have been a mistake. I would have actually rather, I think, had the presidential election go into Monroe's hands. Probably my early placements, I should have gone in favor of Monroe. Here's why. And I mean, they both started in Virginia, so it was my fault entirely. By the way, we lost Buchanan. He added to the chart there. Madison already had a lot of popularity. Monroe getting more would create a more stable position for me in terms of this one player set, having a couple of very popular people as opposed to just one. Now, the advantage though of Madison is he's got a 4 ability because of Abigail, and Monroe does not give that kind of effectiveness to the presidency. So Madison may prove to be a very effective president at a time when we really need one. Good thing we didn't have, President Pickney or Pickering, right? This may not be the most exciting thing to point out, but I wanted to take a look at where the victory points are right now. I'm right at the card drafting. I've pulled my 7 cards out. And we got purple up here, orange over here, yellow, green, and then we can see how badly people are doing as well with blue and red. That's just to give you an idea of kind of the size of the leads that are in play right now. Might as well look at the cards too. I like to see them. John Bell. And there's Honest Abe. Like I said, he's pretty young at this point. And some interesting cards. Franklin Pierce. Okay, what about Dred Scott? Only playable by the Chief Justice, and slavery wasn't resolved. And he has a choice of either giving support to the liberals and IP to the conservatives, or IP to the conservatives. Either way, it increases tension. Not necessarily the best of moves, but I'll tell you what, if purple gets that, they want to push it forward because they'll be getting towards the Civil War, right? Well, wasn't there a penalty for Civil War? Yeah. I believe there was. And that's the danger here. You lose the number of congressional and influence points you hold. And right now, he's got a pretty heavy amount of congressional points. Of course, everybody else does too. And a whole bunch of influence chips he'd have to burn before creating the Civil War. That can be engineered, though. There's no question. So that's kind of a dangerous card to be out there, because he will probably pick that up. People don't have any special abilities. Lincoln's not terribly effective. That might be reasonable. You have to have the Liberal Party and Sedition Act was resolved. Well, this could just be a useless card because sedition was not resolved. That's one problem maybe with the game, which is that so far I'm not seeing too many what-if cards. You know, hey, Sedition Act wasn't passed, and what would that mean for America, right? In this case, this would create tension, public support towards the conservatives, the liberal gets influence, or the liberal player gets an influence. There's been a number of those. They don't really... They give you some effect for having passed or not passed things, but largely now this becomes the destroyed card, right? Because the important speech is more valuable. Free Soil Party requires tension 2 or higher. Hell yeah. Play after Georgia or North Carolina has been fully claimed in an election, and it's going to, affect the election votes, which is also interesting. But probably, well, we're getting late in the game. So maybe winning one last election is more important than adding some more people to your pile, especially if the people don't have a whole hell of a lot in the way of votes, right? This one's worrisome. The Free Soil Party that I was looking at, play after Georgia or North Carolina have been fully claimed, but before results are counted. Half the votes in the Carolinas go to the candidates of your choice. The party cubes in Georgia are replaced by those of your choice. I don't know how to look at that, but I think what happens is both cubes get replaced. Oh wait, is it 2 different states? Yeah. Okay, so Georgia completely gets overwhelmed and half of Carolina switches over. Alright, that makes more sense. Fair enough. I was reading it as though it was one state with 2 different actions applied to it, and they seemed contradictory. But that makes sense. We run down to the bottom of the drafting. Yellow, the person who probably has the most to lose if Dred Scott goes forward. He chose to pass on it and picked up the Free Soil Party, which could win him an election, quite possibly. That leaves it on poor Aaron Burr and Patrick Henry to decide, do they want Dred Scott or do they want make an important speech, which seems pretty damn unvaluable to them. The problem is they're not going to be able to hold the Dred Scott decision without throwing something useful away. Now they could throw Dred Scott away, and who knows? Because they have enough popularity on Burr or Henry that they could gain an influence. But I don't think an influence is worth the game. So that's the thing. The other people were picking up cards that are actually worth something. So I think picking up Dred Scott seems worth it. The question is, do I want to hold that or one of my other? Maryland dividing vote. We're not near the end of Era B. I'm certainly not going to put that away. So the question becomes judicial review. I think I'll keep Dred Scott in my hand and throw the judicial review, because Dred Scott is you can win the game with this card, potentially. The Virginia and Kentucky resolutions, these are absolutely useless, as we said, which means purple will be taking an important speech. And, well, he already has one of those. But he has somebody with sufficient popularity, a couple of somebodies. He could give an influence to one of them. Conglomerating the influence on Pinckney, probably worthwhile, because I can spend it and cash it in on this turn. And then what about the party leaders? Do they want to push the values forward? Well, some of them clearly do. This is going 2 towards red. Oh, I hate these serpentine type charts. They confuse me. Blue has to go up here though, and that goes 1, 2, 3. They work really well once you get used to them, but they're hard. And the Conservatives are not going to push this one forward at this point, up at this point. They're going to see if they can score some more points from them. And the turn ended on kind of an exciting note. Pinckney and company had raised the Conservative value up to here, and you can see they're kind of advancing some of these causes. The Liberals had spent some from, they were president, they had to go first, and now, actually we're not done yet, there's a bid still. Elbridge Gerry spent an important speech because he has some popularity, he has sufficient popularity, and it doesn't look like necessarily I'm going to get that kind of popularity again, maybe till the end of the game. So I spent that on trying to push this into the dominance zone. Well, I failed with my roll. Now, starting way over here, we're going to start looking for bids. Now, he has a lot of influence, so it might be desirable to grab a quick bid there. And I think we actually end things with the final initiative bought over here. I should put some dice on the deck so I remember we're on the presidency stuff. He picked up William Seward, another couple votes, New York. He's kind of getting this liberal combination here that's appealing. It's kind of funny because the definition of, you know, free soilers and not terribly pro-slavery type people, the regional definition of that seems to be fluctuating a little bit. So also, you know, who's what. So the old Virginia folk, a lot of the liberals are in Virginia early in the game, and they're still liberals now. What do those liberals mean? Well, those are the guys who are kind of allied with Lincoln and Seward more at this point. Now, it's hard to believe that the Monroes and the Madison are terribly anti-slavery at this point. And on the other side of things, people like Webster, well, Webster was kind of a, I'm not really remembering well. Clay was the compromiser there. Webster, I think, was more a free soiler, but on the other side, now the more rigidly pro-slavery people are turning up as conservatives at this point. And it's just kind of a funny way of, it isn't just the one issue that's driving things here. There's kind of this interesting mix between all the different people. And it's amusing to kind of try to puzzle out what is meant by the conservative and liberal definitions. Obviously, it's not a single issue thing throughout the game. Therefore, it doesn't make a lot of sense to look at it under those under that kind of lens. But it does make some sense to try to imagine what the combination is, because we're seeing more Western-leaning people looking more and more liberal at this point. And I don't know, do we have Northeasterns? I mean, Franklin Pierce is New Hampshire, and he's conservative. You know, so it doesn't really, he was pretty neutral on the slavery issue, pro-compromise, I would say. But it doesn't really align with that issue. And what other issues does it align with? Well, the Westerners who were pro-free soil were also pro-expanding states. And that may also be factoring into this. Lincoln was something, I wouldn't say he was terribly radical, to tell you the truth, in any direction. So it's not like he's trying to overthrow too much except for the compromise, as it were. He was willing to say, look, there will be no more slave states added. Of course, the compromise was already broken by that point. But again, you can look at the conservative versus liberal also in the status quo side of things. So the seaboard stuff tends to be more conservative, but somebody like Polk is conservative out in the West. Obviously Crockett, who you would think would be kind of not necessarily on the slavery question, but largely on the expanding country, the manifest destiny type feel, would be more liberal on that, if you're taking that kind of interpretation of it. Not sure what to say. Just some reflections. All right, this one's going up.